And while I was in the Peace Corps, I was an education volunteer, just like Jeff. And I taught English and Spanish. That was, well, my primary job was to teach English. I made teaching Spanish my secondary job. I lived in a predominantly Muslim village way out in the sub-Saharan desert, what we call Bruce, out in the bush, but we'd say desert, right, in the desert, 2 hours off the main road, way out there. And so it was very interesting to get to my community after a 2-hour ride into the desert, not knowing what I got myself into, and then just this beautiful community just opens up. These kids running around, bikes, being ridden up and down. You can see the different mosques. There's no internet, there's no electricity, no running water. This is exactly what I wanted. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I wanted that. I wanted to see, the world that people live without the same things that we have, right? The electricity, the running water, the internet, none of that. And so as I'm passing by the mosques, none of the mosques had speakers. So whenever they did the call for prayer, it was just somebody standing outside of the mosque just singing. It was beautiful. I didn't know how they were going to take to me. And my experience was interesting because I stood out, I stood out. And so you had kids come up to me and they touch my skin because they thought I was a ghost. Play with my hair because they've never touched such a thing. These are people, just like, Rihanna was talking about, that have never seen volunteers before, a foreigner, ever in their lives. And so here I come out of nowhere, and it was awesome. I enjoyed them coming up to me and kind of being curious enough to ask questions and see what I'm all about. What I liked about it was that by doing that, I was getting the support. People were like, I want to know who you are. And I'm like, that's funny. I want to know who you are, right? And so for me, it was just like, I'm just going to put myself out there. I can just stand in the middle of the street. I know there's going to be people walking up to me and just talk. So that's what I started to do, And honestly, I didn't have electricity, right? I didn't have any running water. So what am I going to do? Sit in the house all day in the heat? So not having internet, not having any of these things forced me out of the house, which is a blessing in disguise. There's volunteers not too far away with me who had electricity, running water, everything. And so they teach, and then they go home and they just watch documentaries all night, all day, all evening, watching It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia or whatever the show they were watching. So they never really integrated into the community. I didn't have that luxury, right? So I'm like, well, I'm not going to stand by this candle. I'm not just going to sit here. I'm going to get out. And so it forced me to walk around and then end up at the soccer field where all the students would play soccer. And then I started playing soccer myself. People got to know who I was, saw that I didn't have great skills compared to them, but they still were into letting me play, which I really appreciated. All the little kids would run around wanting to come talk to me while I was playing soccer. I'm like, you need to get off the field, you're going to get hurt. But it was awesome. It was a great experience. And I had a friend, which I'll show you a picture of. My best friend, his name's Yusufa. So this to me is my greatest success, right? We talk about projects, we talk about your secondary projects and who you helped out, but honestly, the success for me was just getting to know people and people getting to know me and just providing some insight of what life is outside of that community, what opportunities are out there. So in some ways, I felt like I was there to just create awareness. Well, I was there to create awareness, to outreach, right? And so I had a friend, which I'll show you a picture of. My best friend, his name's Yusufa. So this was a man who had polio, right? So he couldn't walk. But I didn't stop him. He was the godfather of that community. He was the unofficial mayor. So he would sit in his front yard, right? And he opened up shop. He couldn't really make money for his family, so he opened up shop right there. And so because he was my best friend, I got to hang out at his house every single day. Every morning I had breakfast with him. And it was the perfect way for people to get to know me because they go to Yusufa's house for everything. Anything they needed, they go to his house. So I just sit, you guys will see, I'll just sit next to him. And everyone's like, who's that? Who's that? And I'm like, who are you? And so people got to know me, and I got to know them. And in some ways, this is how I was kind of developing support and loyalty. And, people were like, well, if he's hanging out with Yusufa, then he has to be all right. And for me, I just loved it. I love to meet people, and I would also learn the language. So what happened here was during training, the first 3 months of Peace Corps, you're learning a new language, right? I learned French those first 3 months. I was like, all right, I got this. I speak Spanish, so I was like, Spanish, French, not too different. I got this. I got it. But when I got to my community, they spoke a whole different language. Totally different. They only spoke French at school. In the community, it was another language called Fufulte, or Fula, or Pool, from the Fulani people, if anyone's familiar with that group. And I got there, it's like, all right, I can't communicate with anybody here. I don't know their language, so I start getting worried about that. But just by sitting next to Yusufa day in, day out, I started learning the salutations, Jam kordume, yo wow, just little things like that. And so I got to practice as well. And so I was learning the language. I was doing a lot of things. This is my success as a volunteer. I was learning the language by just hanging out. I'm not saying that's all you're going to do, right? You're going to do more than just hanging out. But just by hanging out, I got to learn the language. By hanging out, I started getting to know who the community leaders are. People got to know who I am. So I was establishing this trust and support that you really need to be a successful volunteer. Because you can go in there with a list of ideas, a list of projects that you want to do. You might as well toss that in the trash because you don't know what that community needs or wants, right? Until you get there. You have to be there, and you gradually start making that assessment. You start looking around, be like, all right, I see how these, all right, I see. And as you get to know people, they become your friends, your neighbors, your students. You get to hear about their grievances, what their issues are, what their problems are. And when you're doing that, you're thinking, you know what, I think I can help you out. I don't know how to do this, but I know how to get information. And so to me, that was success, is my ability to go online, in the internet, use Google to get information that's going to help them, it's going to benefit them. Some examples of how I managed to do that was, the first one was, I became friends with a farmer whose parents had recently died, right? And he's like, look, I'm cool with you now, you're cool with me, I want to show you my farm, come out to my farm. So I went out there, he's like, check it out, this is what I do, and I want to grow something new. My parents have been growing the same thing for decades. My family's been growing the same thing for decades. I want to grow something new. I said, man, this is the first time stepping into a farm. I don't know how I can help you. He's like, wait, you're here to help, right? It's like, not wrong about that. But the good thing is, like, if you have compassion, right, that's going to drive you. You hear something, you're like, that hurts. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to help out. And so I remember going that weekend to the regional capital, going online and saying, okay, what can you grow in the desert? And one of the first things that popped up was black-eyed peas. So I read it, and I saw that it takes about 3 to 4 months, the gestation period. I was like, okay, I'm going to see if I can help them out with this. I mean, 3 to 4 months, I can see some results, if it happens. So I printed it all out. I took it back to my community, and I translated it in French, best of my ability. I was like, all right, look, this is how you go about growing this thing called black-eyed peas, right? It's like, cool, but where do I get it? Oh, man. So I did my research, asked around, asked volunteers, and it turns out that 2 regions south from the region that I was in, there was a big market, the big capital there, that sold black-eyed peas. And so I was like, all right, solid. So I paid for it. So him and I traveled down to that region. It was an 8-hour bus ride. We went to the market. 8 hours. 2 hours is like 30 minutes. 4 hours is like an hour. Yeah. You build up. Yeah. You'll notice that. So we go out to this market. I'm like, look, you're gonna have to do this yourself because they're gonna see me and they're gonna want to charge me a lot more than they would charge you. All right. So you go for it. All right. I'll just stand out here and wait. So you got the seeds, you got it, and we left. We came back. I was like, all right, man, we'll go do your thing. Let me know how it goes. And I just continued on my life teaching my English. 3 to 4 months passed. He's like, Carlos, come on, let's go to my farm. I got something to show you. Takes me to my farm and just rows upon rows upon rows of black-eyed peas. I'm like, oh, cool. It worked. I helped out, and I had no clue that I was capable of doing something like that. Again, I didn't know anything about farming, but I knew how to get information and knowledge. That's the cool thing about Peace Corps. Like, it was a soccer game. It was Congo, the DRC, versus Cameroon, and we decided to go check it out. We were looking for where to sit or where to stand, and we found this group of folks who were just really rowdy. I guess it would be the equivalent of like a hooligan group at a soccer game. And so we go over there, and we're standing around looking really awkward. We sit down, and it didn't take very long for people to start making noises and doing this, right? Just making this movement. I'm like, oh, guys, I think they want us out of here. Like, we're not rowdy enough, or I don't know what it is, but I think we need to get out of here. Like, they're doing this. And so we start getting up, we're walking around with like our heads down, our tails tucked between our legs. And I don't forget, this was a red whistle. Someone threw a red whistle at me. And it dropped to the floor. I'm like, all right, whatever. I picked it up, I looked at it, and I just blew the whistle. And they went absolutely insane. You know, they're like, yeah, LeBlanc, which means the white. And then I'm like, all right, hold up. Let's go back. I think we got this. So after blowing the whistle, we're having fun. We're hanging out for a little bit.
and we kind of stopped blowing the whistle, whatever. And then one of the guys that was there started pulling on my shirt and doing this. I'm like, oh god, we're not rowdy enough. I don't know what it is. I think they want us out. Guys, let's get out of here. Like, all right, we tried. I think they want us out. So as I'm getting up, the guy's like, no, mon ami, le chemise, which means no, the shirt. I'm like, they want me to take my shirt off. So I'm like, whatever, I have nothing to lose. I took my shirt off and they went absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, guys, if I'm doing this, y'all doing it too. And as you guys can see, they took their shirt off. And after that, it was just fun. They gave us like the drums to beat on, and it was such a great experience. Especially just 1 month in, I was like, I think I got myself in the right situation. I think I'm going to do all right as a Peace Corps volunteer.